So this is the brand new Nothing Phone 2, and I think this is one of the best looking smartphones of 2023. It has this aesthetic that's nothing like anything else that's out there. And it's not because of this glyph interface. Personally, I think the glyph interface is a massive gimmick. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, why do I want a bunch of massive LED notification lights on the back of my phone? Could you imagine if you're in a meeting and you have this big light up while you're talking to somebody? Do you know how distracting that is? Then there's the other thing of putting cases on your phone. Most people use a case on their device. If you don't use a case, you got big balls. I tried not using a case for a few days. I got so scared I slapped a case on it immediately because I didn't want my phone to break because I'm such a klutz. But most cases that I see are usually OtterBox cases, they're Apple silicone cases, they're different colors. And yes, technically you could put a clear case on this so you can see the notifications, but I just feel like they're a massive gimmick. On top of that, I don't like placing my phone face down. And that's because I don't like using screen protectors. Some screen protectors add additional glare to your device, which is kind of annoying. Other screen protectors reduce the amount of contrast you're looking at, so it takes away from the visual fidelity. Plus, if I'm gonna scratch the phone, I would rather scratch the back of the device than the screen. I'm looking at the screen the majority of the time. I don't wanna see any scratches on it. Whereas on the back, I'm just not looking at it at all. Plus, on top of that, I set up all of the glyphs on this thing and I didn't even notice them, just because the way I personally use it. It didn't add any value to my life whatsoever. But they had to do this. They had to do this. Could you imagine if Nothing came out with a phone that had no different feature compared to the competition? They wouldn't get anywhere. It would just be another candy bar phone on the market for $599. We have tons of them that exist already. They just wouldn't penetrate the market at all. But this design puts them in the news. It puts them in the news cycle so people are talking about them. And that's exactly what this is for. So I'm gonna review the phone without the glyph system because I still think it's a fantastic device regardless of this gimmicky feature. And I think the best way to do it is to compare it to the Pixel 7 because it too also costs $599. And the best way to review something is to give you guys some context. Now this is a big phone. If you've ever held an iPhone 14 Pro Max or 13 Pro Max, that's exactly how big this phone is. Just as tall, 6.7-inch display, not as wide, but pretty darn close. In fact, the first time I picked it up, it felt a lot like a Galaxy S23 Plus. But it's a beautiful phone. Like, look at this thing. You know, it has these beautiful aluminum edges. Of course, it does showcase these cellular bands over here. The buttons are nice and clicky. You have your microphone on top, and then not microphone, but your noise canceling microphone, volume rocker, and this big, beautiful OLED display. The one thing that I did notice though was that the back glass is kind of curved. Now, this is an issue in some ways. For one, it kind of makes the phone feel or sound like plastic. That's what I honestly thought it was. I honestly thought this was plastic the first time I touched it. Because when you touch a phone where the glass is closer to the body, there's no gap. But they had to put a gap in order to leave space for this glyph system. Not a big deal, I'm just pointing it out. The other thing I noticed was that the camera bump is not too bad. Like, if you pick up an iPhone 14 Pro Max, that thing is like wobbling all over the table. Now, unfortunately, this phone is not IP68, it's only IP54, which means it's just splash and dust resistant, whereas the Pixel 7, on the other hand, is full IP68. So I'd feel a lot more confident accidentally dropping my phone in a puddle of water compared to the Nothing Phone 2. Now, both phones do have dual speakers, and I want you guys to let me know which one sounds better. Now, phone size is always a personal thing. If you want something with a good screen size, but it's a bit more one-handable, you gotta go for the Pixel 7. It's a 6.3-inch display, and personally, I feel like 6.3 to 6.4 is the sweet spot for display size. It's big enough that I get a big display, but it's also still very wieldy with one hand. The 6.7-inch display is for those of you out there that just want the biggest screen possible. It's just a big phone, a lot harder to move your fingers around. Now, here's the thing. Fingerprint placement is a bit different on both phones. And this is a minor nitpick, okay? On the Pixel 7, it's placed perfectly, directly on the upper middle. Like, no problem, my finger just goes there naturally. On the Nothing Phone 2, it's all the way at the bottom. It's a bit of a stretch. Now, it does require a little bit more movement from your finger, but you know, it's the little things that sometimes set some phones apart from the other. Now, in terms of getting into your phone, I do find the Nothing Phone 2 to be faster. I've had a few issues where I'd have to like push the fingerprint sensor more than once on the Pixel 7 sometimes. Not as bad as the early days of the Pixel 6, but the Nothing Phone 2 definitely gets you in quicker. The display technology are a bit different on both phones. The Nothing Phone 2 is using a 120 Hz OLED display, but it's LTPO, which means it can ramp up anywhere from 1 Hz all the way up to 120. The Pixel 7 is also OLED and it's also 1080p, but it's only 90 Hz and it doesn't have an LTPO panel, so it doesn't have the same sort of efficiency. Now, is there a big difference in terms of fluidity between 90 and 120? If you're holding both phones beside each other and you're scrolling up and down, you can notice that the Phone 2 is definitely smoother. Is it a deal breaker that this is 90 instead of 120? For most people, absolutely not. It's not like you're coming from a 60 Hz display. 90 is still a big difference than 60 and you do notice it. But yes, having 120 Hz is slightly better. In terms of overall brightness, they both reach 1000 nits when you're outdoors, but peak brightness when HDR on is a bit higher on the Nothing Phone 2. It can ramp up all the way to 1600 nits compared to 1400. Now, is this going to make a difference in your day-to-day use of the device? Absolutely not, unless you're watching HDR content 24/7. So right now you're looking at the front-facing cameras of the Nothing Phone 2 and the Pixel 7. The Nothing Phone can only shoot up to 1080p 60, but I'm shooting in 30 right now. But the Pixel 7 can shoot 4K 30. You guys let me know which one obviously looks better and which one has the better microphone. The camera setup is very interesting because they're both rocking a main lens or a wide lens and an ultra wide lens. The Nothing Phone 2 has a 50 megapixel wide lens and a 50 megapixel ultra wide lens. The Pixel is also sporting a 50 megapixel wide lens, but it only has a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. But here's the thing, you know, camera sensors aside, it all comes down to computational photography, and the Pixel is obviously ahead. It just takes much better photos than the Nothing Phone 2. And it's not like the Phone 2 takes terrible photos, it just needs a little bit of work. I found that the Phone 2 tended to make the pictures look very contrasty. It tended to crush the blacks. And in some of these photos, you lose a little bit of those details in the shadow, whereas the Pixel was able to bring those shadows up so you can see what's actually going on. Even exposure was more consistent on the Pixel device. It was able to nail the exposure more often than the Nothing Phone. Sometimes the scene on the Nothing Phone was a bit too bright, and other times it was, you know, contrasty, but then you're crushing the blacks a bit too much, and it just didn't provide a proper balance. They gotta lay off the contrast slider, bring it down a little bit, and I think the overall photos will look significantly better. The front-facing cameras are also interesting because this one has a 32 megapixel camera, and they both actually take very good photos. I just personally think that the Pixel does a better job. I'm a bit too white with the Nothing Phone 2. I look very ghostly, whereas the Pixel 7 shows the proper color of my skin. But nighttime photos is where things truly matter because that puts the cameras to its full capacity and really shows you what these things can do. And look, the Nothing Phone 2 takes, you know, pretty good, decent night photos, but again, the Pixel is still on another level. I remember there was this one scene of the soccer field and I could see the entire field clearly. I couldn't even see it with my eyes. But with the Pixel phone, it brightened up the whole scene that it was enough that I could see across the entire thing. The Nothing Phone 2 just couldn't do that. Even like the zoom lens was too dark, and same with the ultra wide lens. It just couldn't lift up or get in enough light to show the content that was exactly in front of my eyes. But again, we're talking about a company that's only been out for a couple of years compared to the Pixel device, which is like at the top of the top for taking some of the best photos on a camera phone. But look, if you're shooting videos, it's almost comparable, but I think the Phone 2 again struggles from introducing a little bit too much contrast, crushing those blacks a bit too much, and it just throws off the video image. And with that, you just get some details that are lost. I will say though that the stabilization on the Phone 2 is better than what the Pixel is capable of. Software on both of these phones are very interesting because they come from different perspectives. The Nothing Phone tends to be a bit more minimalistic, a bit cleaner. It gets rid of all the fluff and introduces their own sort of theming. I like it. I think it looks super clean. I love the fonts and the stylizations that they're using. It has this very monochromatic nerdy look from like the 80s to it. And I think it just sets itself apart from everything else. Is it the best theme I've used? No. I personally still prefer the Pixel just because, I don't know, like they just have done such a good job of keeping things clean, but not introducing software that gets in the way. And also the fact that you're continuously getting drops throughout the year that add a little bit of functionality to your lifestyle, I find is also very important. Now, it's not a major difference, you know, like I feel like regardless of which software experience you end up with, you're still gonna be happy because I think they did a fantastic job in their own regard. Now, battery life is where the Nothing Phone 2 truly excels. 4,700 milliamp hour battery, 7 hours of screen on time, easily taking this phone to 2 days before actually having to charge. It's a great experience. It doesn't have like crazy OnePlus fast charging. It can charge 45 watts, which is very similar to Galaxy devices. I think with the Pixel 7, it can only charge up to 20 or 25 watts wired charging. It does have wireless charging up to 15 watts, which is slightly slower than the 20 on the Pixel 7. And both of these devices do have reverse wireless charging. Now, the cool thing with the Phone 2 is the cable that comes with it. You plug it in, it has this cool transparent look. I love the little details. And then when you plug it in, the little glyph on the bottom kind of lights up and tells you exactly how much it's charged, and it will continue to increase in light capacity until it gets to 100%. But performance is also an area where the Pixel 7 really never does the best. You know, their hardware tends to be with older chips, but Google has done such a great job of optimizing the software experience. Yes, on paper, this Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 is faster than the Google Tensor 2 chip that's inside of here. But I didn't feel like the difference in terms of overall fluidity day in, day out was much of a difference. You know, yes, it feels faster because of the 120 Hertz display, but I still feel like the Pixel 7 performs very well even after 8 months of being used. The idea though is that if you do buy these phones, they both come with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. But if you do go up to the 256 gigabyte model with the Phone 2, you will get 12 gigabytes of RAM, so you can have more stuff that's being opened up in the background. So here's the thing, I really like the Nothing Phone 2, I really do, and I don't think $599 is an unreasonable price to ask for it. But you have to ask yourself what you truly want in a smartphone today. If cameras are the most important thing, then the Nothing Phone 2 is not for you. You're better off with a Pixel or a Galaxy S23. If you truly think you're gonna be using this glyph system, then what you're getting essentially is a phone that has fantastic battery life, a very clean and customizable software experience, a beautiful display, and a very solid product overall. Just know that you're not gonna be getting one of the best cameras out there. The camera's like decent, it's not amazing. With the Pixel on the other hand, you get the best of everything. Sure, it doesn't feel as fast as the Nothing Phone 2, but you get a bit more updates, you get slightly worse battery life, a very similar display experience, but you get one of the best camera systems on a smartphone. So you have to really ask yourself, how much do you really want to invest into this glyph system before buying this device? Because to truly appreciate it, you gotta have the balls to go caseless, or at least buy a case that's clear. Anyways, that wraps up my review of the Nothing Phone 2. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section down below. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.